Well, hello, everybody.
Hello.
Yes. Welcome, welcome. I am Laina Orlando, and I am thrilled to be here to introduce you guys to A Course in Miracles. And I cannot thank Penelope enough and Stacy for inviting me to come and bring A Course in Miracles to the community, because this is by far the most powerful teaching I have found. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about me to kind of give you a little background on what qualifies me to stand up here and share this with you. But I started my spiritual journey 17 years ago, right after my mom passed away. And when she passed away, it sent me on a journey to try and figure out, who the heck am I? Because with her passing, I bumped up against my fear of death. And I had grown up Catholic, and Catholicism was practiced by my family. I grew up in the Dominican Republic, so I went to masses in Latin. I never understood what they were saying, but my grandmother made sure that I had the fear of God in me. My father he's American, my mom's Dominican. My father's parents his dad is Italian and his mother is Irish. So I had that side of the Catholics, the drunk side of the Catholics. And then I had my grandmother's side of the Catholics. Anyways, I had this terror of death after my mom passed away, to the point that it was actually debilitating. I was feeling so paralyzed with fear that just did not make sense for me to be grieving my mom's passing and have this incredible fear. My dad had died not too long before my mom had, maybe a year or so earlier. I had my grandparents die. So it wasn't death or somebody dying that I was so upset about. It was actually the process of me dying. So anyways, a friend of mine, I call her my angel friend. When I said to her that I was so scared of dying, she said to me, "Here, read this book." So she handed me a book about near-death experiences. I don't remember the author, but the book is called Into the Light. It was a New York Times bestseller in the 80s, and she gave me this book, and I read it, and it was about a woman who she had been, even though she was Native American, she was raised in a convent, so she grew up with Catholic upbringing. And she had a terror of dying as well, because she had learned about a fearful God. So when she had her death experience, she met God, and God was a loving God. So she comes out of her death experience and begins to talk about God in a different way. And I thought, wow, this is so cool. And what that helped me understand is that when you die, there's more. So it wasn't this end, because I knew I was a sinner. God, I can give you a long list of things that I've done that were not nice. So I knew I was going to go to hell, and I was going to end up churning and burning for eternity. So knowing that there was a future that was loving was so, so helpful. And that same friend, wise beyond her even knowing how wise she is, gave me another book. And that other book that she gave me is by Brian Weiss, Dr. Brian Weiss, Many Masters, Many Lives. And it's about past lives. So I found myself right in the middle of these two bookends. I found peace that the future has a loving God, and I found out that we've been around a long time, and something clicked in my mind. What happened is I began to realize that life is a circle, that the eternalness of what we are is a circle. It is never ending. That's why reincarnation is part of the process. So there's no end. So there's no need for me to be afraid of death, because there is no such thing as death. It's eternalness. The Hindus knew that. So I'm just going to stop there with telling you about how I got into the spiritual journey. But let me just say that I've been teaching now for about 13, 14 years. And it just kind of began because I heard a voice. I heard the voice of Jesus. And for me, because I was Catholic, that consciousness, the mind, the one mind spoke to me, and it felt like Jesus. If Buddha would have talked to me, or Muhammad, like I say in my other class that you come to, it would have freaked me out, because I wasn't familiar. Those were not peeps that I was used to. But Jesus, I was comfortable with Jesus. He was about the only one in Catholicism that I felt a kinship to. So I began to hear guidance, and I was told to write a workshop. And I was a realtor. And I was like, what, a workshop? Okay, I'll write this workshop called The Power of Awareness. And I was literally told to leave my career and to start teaching the power of awareness. And I did, faithfully did, because I was feeling this voice guiding me. People would come to the workshop, and every single workshop, there would be at least one person who would say, is this based on A Course in Miracles? And I would say, no, it's not. I didn't even know what A Course in Miracles was the first couple of times. After that, I looked it up and I realized, oh, that's Marianne Williamson's book. And then I studied a little further and I found out, no, she wrote a book about the Course in Miracles. And I was, hey there, I asked, I said, should I be studying this course? And I was told, no, it's not your time. Okay, so I went on to teach Power of Awareness. I started a center, the Center for Awareness in East Cobb. I've since closed it. And the guidance continued until the day that I was supposed to study A Course in Miracles, and that happened December of 2011. So I was being prepared to understand what the Power of Awareness was about. It gave me a really solid foundation. I'll tell you, the Power of Awareness workshop is the 6 phases that we all go through from conception to enlightenment. And it sorts everything out in that we have an ego, we have our human side, and we have our soul side. There's always a choice between love and fear. So I had a foundation of the simplicity of what the journey is about. And then when I was led to read A Course in Miracles, I discovered that there was so much more that I needed to learn. So I devoured this book, and this is not my original book. If you saw it, you would laugh because it's so full of markings. There's not a single section that's not colored with highlighters. But what I began to realize when I started teaching A Course in Miracles, and I have a class that's been going on for about 5 years, is it probably will take me this lifetime, maybe the next one also, to really comprehend what is in this book. It is so layered, it is so powerful, it is so deep, but at the same time, it is really very simple. So I want to introduce you to the Course in Miracles, and I'm so grateful that you're here. By a raise of hand, tell me, who has been studying the Course under 1 year? Okay. Who's been with it a year to 5 years? Okay. Anybody here more than 5 years? No? Okay.
Never. Yeah, never.
Well, you know what? Yes. Who has never studied it? Oh my gosh. Wow. Thank you for having me ask that question. I was just assuming that everybody was at least somewhat familiar, maybe had started it. Perfect. Perfect. Newbies. So the Course in Miracles is channeled material. And in the 1960s, there were two psychologists, and these were research psychologists and professors of psychology in New York. And the two of them worked together, and they were always at odds. You know, this was a time when the woman, Helen Schuckman, you know, women were kind of new into the corporate world and new in that arena. She was wanting to climb the corporate ladder, if you will. So there was a lot of contention, her trying to prove herself, and, you know, Bill worked with her. I think he actually worked as an assistant to her. So they had a lot of tension between them. And Bill one day said, you know, Helen, there's got to be another way. We can't continue to work like this. The department was in chaos. A lot of things were not working for them. And not too long after that, Helen came to him and said, oh my gosh, I heard a voice. Now, they did not want to talk about this because they worked in a psychiatric section of the hospital. And there were people that got locked up for hearing voices. So Helen was like, okay, I'm only going to tell you about it, Bill. And Bill said, yes, this will be our little secret. What is the voice telling you? And she said, the voice says, this is A Course in Miracle, write it down. And Bill said, well, what are you doing? She said, well, this scares me. And a couple weeks went by, are you still hearing the voice? And she said, yes. It keeps saying, this is A Course in Miracles, write this down. And Bill said, well, just write it down. So she started to write it down. For 7 years, she would hear the voice, and she, in shorthand, would take dictation, and then she would read her shorthand notes back to Bill, and Bill would type it out. So for 7 years, this took place, and in 1976, the Course in Miracles, the first edition, was published. So I went back to also look at Science of Mind. And Science of Mind got published, well, copyrighted in 1926. It was published a couple of years before that, but copyrighted in 1926. And I began to think, wow, 50 years. 50 years between one, publishing and copywriting, and then comes A Course in Miracles. Because Science of Mind, I went back and I was reading my Science of Mind books, which is pretty highlighted too. And as I was reading it, I thought, oh my gosh, the similarities are uncanny. There's so much that is very, very much the same, but there's also a lot that's very different. And it's only different in that the Course in Miracles goes extremely deep and totally and completely detailed in the way that we develop our ego, the way that we develop our human side, which is the way how we obstruct, how we block our divine side. And Science of Mind doesn't go into that depth. However, what Science of Mind says, at the essence of Science of Mind, is the same thing that Course in Miracles is saying. There is one power. There is one infinite mind. There is one intelligence. That intelligence is loving. And we had a master teacher of that came to teach us what that loving intelligence does, and that was Christ. So as I'm looking through this, and I go to the chapter 22 in Science of Mind, finding the Christ, and I started reading that, I was like, oh my gosh, this is just so beautiful. So because you guys are Science of Mind students, practitioners, you're going to love this. This is really going to give you something that is going to, my intention for you is to take the information that you already know in your head and begin to move it down so you can feel it in your heart. The Course in Miracles becomes very heady for people who come at it from an intellectual perspective. But those who move beyond the intellect and decide that they really want to feel the truth of the Course in Miracles have a heart-opening experience that is absolutely life-altering. And I'll talk a little bit about that. Tonight is just an introduction to it. I could spend 10 hours introducing you to it because there's so much to share about introducing the Course. And then for the next 5 weeks, we're going to go into specific items about it, and I'm going to break it down. And I can promise you that by tonight, you're going to want to study it, and by the end of the 6 weeks, you're going to fall in love with the Course because it is just that powerful. So I want to go to Science of Mind. I was looking at this, and I noticed in the foreword written by Jean Houston, I was reading things in here where she says that this is the book for the ages. She goes on to say that this book is lays out a blueprint for the remaking of the mind and the reenactment of the world. It is a hidden masterpiece which must be discovered only when one is ready to enter upon a larger life. And I'm like, that's exactly what the Course in Miracles is. Then it goes on to say, and I'm just skipping, so if you're going to try and follow me, don't if you're going to open this. But the essence of the teachings of Science of Mind, it would be that the highest God and the innermost God is one God. The core of each human being is the original creative genius of the universe. Isn't that beautiful? The core of every one of us is the original creative genius of the universe. We are therefore the lensing of God stuff on earth. That's so beautiful. The focalization of eternity in time. Consciously or unconsciously, we direct the flow of universal mind into form. In Homer terms, the cosmic engine is started, but man guides it in its own life. This grants us tremendous power, and with it the innate responsibility to make or break our world through the extraordinary workings of the power of the mind. Thus, the practical emphasis in Science of Mind, Thus, the practical emphasis in the Science of Mind of schooling in the power of trained thought. So much of our ordinary thinking lapses into habitual patterns, with little variation from one day to the next. Our lives mirror this and fall into serial monotony, interrupted by episodes of trouble, panic, and loss. We live then as limited, crippled versions of who and what we are, suffering the continuance of emotional plagues and toxic thoughts, and the world reflects this tragically. So I'm reading this and I'm going, wow, if you guys are studying science of mind, you probably know what she wrote. You probably get this stuff. So I'm going to put this aside because that could have been an introduction for Course in Miracles. And what that is saying is that we are powerful beyond measure. There is one power, there is one God. And we are the opportunity for that to express itself. Now, the Course in Miracles is also a course that is going to turn your thinking upside down. It has to. Not only will it turn it upside down, but it's going to turn it inside out. So you're going to be doing, flips. Your mind, in many ways, your mind is going to have some massive moments of breakdown. You're going to find, it's like the gears are going to lock down because some of the information that you're going to hear, you're not going to be able to compute because they are outside of the realm of our conditioning. And it usually takes something tragic to happen to people to stop and begin to say, there's got to be another way, which is what Bill said. For me, when I began to have my experience with Jesus, it was that. There's got to be another way. I mean, I'm scared to death about life and what's going on. And inevitably, I got the answer. Well, the reason I got the answer, the reason Helen and Bill got the answer, the reason Ernest Holmes got the answer is because when you go inside and you make that commitment to really discover the truth of who you are, that truth wants to be discovered. That truth is waiting for us to say, tell me all about it. Because we are the ones who have been blocking the truth by creating our own thinking.